The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by Tenant Controls, makers of lighting kits, soundboards, and more. Tenant Controls brings your models to life. And by XD Model Works, suppliers of scale model lighting products, detail parts, and complete model kits. Visit xdamodelworks.com today. Hello again, my fellow YouTube modelers. Boyd here, and welcome to part 2 of our Moebius 1/144 scale 2001 A Space Odyssey XD-1. This is a really cool model to work on so far, guys. I have to say I've been having a good time with it. It's going together really nice. Time to get you all caught up on what I've been doing with this since our last video. We left off in part 1 working on the rear section of the ship here, working on the engines and everything, and getting our lighting figured out. So I've been putting in some time on that, and I wanted to share with you guys what I've been up to here. As you remember, at the beginning of this whole build plan, I was talking about this rear area of the ship here and how we wanted to make this into our battery compartment slash control board compartment, so that this model could be self-contained and self-powered. It could sit on a stand and not have any wires come off of it, or if I decided at some point later I wanted to hang it up maybe. Kind of going to throw that plan out because working with it, I can already see there's going to be too much sagging going on in the center of it without the support there. So hanging it up would be kind of difficult. So it'll probably be sitting on its stand when we're finished with it here. But this whole plan that we talked about here at the rear worked out really good. I'll take this lid off of here. You can see it just pops right off of here really nice and tight. We followed the idea that we had here, going around and just gluing on the lower half of these side panels, you know, these detail panels that are on here, just gluing those down on the sides and not gluing this top. And then they fit nice and tight, so there was a little bit of pressure there when you put the lid off and on, and it doesn't go on there. You know, if you tip it over, it won't just fall off. It's got a little bit of pressure there, and the seams all seem to close up really well on this too, so that worked out really good. Now, a couple of mods I had to do to this to make it work. Normally these slots that you see right here didn't go all the way down to the bottom, so I just took and opened those up all the way with my hobby knife, just cut that extra plastic out of there. That way this piece here can, you know, basically line up with these tabs that are in there and just push straight down on. We'll just kind of show you how that works, and it just locks right into place like that, nice and tight, and that worked out good. But we did some more modifications here on the interior to get our lighting plan figured out. So I'll go ahead and walk you through this. You can see the biggest thing that I did in here is I mounted this piece of MDF. It's a really high density wood fiber type material, and it's perfect for making model mounts and things like that. So I cut out this particular shape, just a basic square there, and took some measurements. Now normally the rod here that you see, this, you know, spine support rod that's actually hollow, runs all the way back to about here inside this engine. And so bringing our wiring up through there, you know, deciding to light these engines, bringing our wire up through there would have been basically impossible, because we would have had to cut into this tubing somewhere to get more wiring in to go to the front part of the model. So what I decided to do is not have the rod go all the way back. It's not, you know, super critical that we support the whole back part of the model right here. It's still going to be fine just the way it is. So I slid the rod forward just a little bit, leaving a little gap right here. That way I can feed my wires. I'm going to be pushing them in from the front here. And when they come out here in the back, I'll pull them through. And you can see we've got a spot here on one side for the 9-volt battery to sit in here, which will make a little I'll show you how to make a really simple little clip in here out of styrene plastic that'll hold the battery in place. And then we'll have our little control board from Tenna Controls that I've spoken to Ralph about. He's working on that for us right now. We'll talk about that in the next couple of videos probably. But our little control board, our remote control board, will sit right in here. So we've got plenty of room in here. This is going to work out really good. And since there's no lighting in this area at all, it's at the very rear. We don't have to worry about light leaks or anything coming out of that, so that's going to work out just fine. Now, the lighting itself, I decided to go with the 0805 SMDs. I'll get one of those out and show it to you really quick here. I should have an extra one laying here. I decided to go with 6 of them, one for each of the engine exhaust ports here. And it took a little fiddling around with that to get everything lined up just right to where it lit evenly, and it got in the center of those grills. So, but I wanted to show you, in case some of you out there working with lighting haven't used these before. This is the number 0805 SMD. You can see it's a really tiny little light emitting diode there. Just, you know, the difference between this is basically the same thing that's inside of an LED. You just don't have the plastic lens around it. Now these particular ones that I like to use come pre-wired. You can see it has a resistor already attached. These are set up to run comfortably between 9 and 12 volts DC. I build most of my models here and run them at 9 volts. That seems to be a nice happy medium. You know, things don't get too hot, and it's easier on everything, so it should last a really long time. So that's perfect for our little 9-volt battery that we're going to put in here. So I ran these wires. You can see we've got this little tip on here. I basically got all my holes lined up here. I drilled all the way through these bulkheads to open everything up. I had to make a little notch at the bottom of this sort of tub here so the wires could clear. And then when we put this lid down on here, you can see we notched that as well in these little spots right here. Just really simple, so that when we close this down, it can go all the way tight and it won't, you know, crimp or pinch our wires. So that worked out pretty good. So we've got 6 of these little SMDs that are just pushed back in here through the tubes. The bulkheads had to be drilled out inside these engine modules, as I talked about, because originally the rod's supposed to fit in there. So I made sure that was all opened all the way up. We got our SMDs pulled through, and then I mounted 2 SMDs for each one of these little ports here, one in each of these sections right here. Now you can see where these kind of come to this little point right here. This little faceplate and everything has a little point on it. You know, it's kind of this stop sign shape here. But at the very tip of the point on the inner part of the tube that you'll kind of see in there, at the very tip of that is where I mounted each SMD and just glued it in place with a little bit of CA glue. And that put those lights right in the center of each one of these grills. You'll have to, you know, kind of fiddle around with it yourself a little bit if you decide to do that. But that's how it worked out. So there's 6 of these 0805 SMDs, you know, 1 for each port. And then we've got our wires all terminated here. These will connect directly to our control board once we get it from Ralph. That'll mount right in here. And they'll be, you know, this will look a lot neater and everything all cleaned up when we get all that laid in. Then we're going to put our little 9-volt battery in here on the other side, a little power harness coming off of that over to the board. Now I'm going to mount a little micro on and off switch inside of here too. I was talking to Ralph and he told me that even though with his remote board that we're going to be using for this, that even though it's turned off, it still will use a little bit of power over time. So if we're going to leave the battery in here, I don't want to have that drawing it down while it's sitting. So I'll just have a little switch, you know, whenever I want to turn the model on or display it or whatever, I can walk over and lift this cover off, turn on my switch, you know, put the cover back on, and then I can operate everything with my remote, and we'll be just fine. So this is all working out really good. Now this little wooden block here, I drilled out the hole. The shaft here is, excuse me, it's 5/16 outside diameter. And so I drilled a 5/16 hole all the way through there, and I used a little bit of 2-part epoxy here to glue it down. Just like I said, took my measurements and everything to make sure that I wound up with a correct amount of rod length to where it terminates up here, where we've got our little junction area. That, you know, this is a spot inside the model where the forward rod connects to this. So we got that all worked out just right. So And you guys can also ask me any kind of questions. If you have a question about the lighting that you didn't understand here, or what I was explaining, you can just drop a question on the video here on the comment section and I'll answer that for you. But it was really straightforward. Like I said, just putting everything in there. Working on the engine cones themselves, these assemblies are made up of these individual sections that you assemble kind of like a, like a blossom, or like a tulip, like a flower. The petals on it kind of go around, to make the perimeter. And so we had little gaps in there. Now I wound up using this Vallejo acrylic putty. I really like this stuff because it has a really fine tip applicator, and I just basically came on here and put a really fine bead where these seams were, and then just took a Q-tip with a little bit of water on it and just kept rubbing it off of there until I got rid of all the excess, and it just the putty just remained down inside where the little gaps were in that, because when we powered it up we had a lot of light leaks coming around that, and we fixed all that and then we painted it. Now on the back here you can see these plates that go on. They kind of just go straight down in there. We had light leaks around those too, so I did the same thing. I just took this putty and I just went around and made a really fine bead all the way around there. This is before I dropped it in, and I let it, while it was still kind of wet, and I pushed it in there, and I of course put a couple of drops of glue in there with that, because that glue will actually work with that acrylic putty, and just let it sit up for about a couple hours or whatever, and then I came back and checked it, and all of our light leaks were gone. So we had a little bit of putty that kind of built up that leaked out a little bit, so again, just a wet Q-tip with some water, and I went in here and cleaned up all that, and then I finished all my detail painting. I'm going to be coming back here with a little bit of gray artist chalk to simulate a little bit of dust, the soot that's supposed to be on these engines. But that's our basic look for the engine detail there. We've got our little screens that we used our photo etch parts for. So I'll just kind of light this up for you. I'm still tweaking on it a little bit. I still doing a little bit of light blocking on it, and diffusion work and all that, but it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Let me see, we get this negative one on here, and again, this will in the end these lights will be connected directly to our control board, and we're going to show you how we wire that up once that comes in. That's a couple of weeks off yet here, but just wanted to give you a quick look at the lighting on the engines, and just got to make sure we don't touch anything here. So that's basically how it looks, and it's not super bright, but it's it's going to look really good in a room with low lighting when we have it on display eventually. Now, like I said, those are going to come on. We'll be able to operate that on a remote switch, and there's going to be a little special effect that I've asked Ralph to work on there, where they kind of slowly ramp up and they do a little bit of flickering before they get totally bright, kind of like simulating an engine startup. So that'll be kind of cool. Now our lighting at the front, we're going to be just bringing two simple wires, a red and a black in this 30 gauge wrapping wire that I like to use here. And we're going to just feed that in from the front, and we're going to bring that all the way in, and once we see it popping out here, we'll grab it with our tweezers and pull it and leave enough slack, and that'll be just sitting there remaining to be connected once we get all of our forward lighting done and all of our what we're going to do for the front end. Now that's why I decided to start at the rear of this model first, is because we're still waiting on a couple little things. There's Jerry at XD-1 Model Works is developing some decals for the photo etch interior parts for our cockpit and our pod bay detail. So it'll be a little while before those are ready, but he's working hard on them, and so we'll have to kind of save that towards the end. But we're just working on the spine area here now, and building these little cargo modules, and that's what we're going to show you in the build part of the video today. Just kind of show you it's a lot of repetitive work. We're just going to show you basically how one of them goes together, and you're going to repeat that process several times, and then of course do all your little detail painting and everything on that as you go along. Now I've come up with my overall paint scheme on this model too. Here you can see I mixed up a color that's sort of a slate white. It's like a dirty eggshell white, and then applied that as my decided that would be the basic color of my hull. So I sprayed the entire model down in black first, and then I came back over that with some regular gray primer, and then I just laid down my base coat over that, spraying at different angles with my airbrush and stuff, so it kind of gave some nice shading and brought out some of the highlights and paneling details. And then I came back, and you can see here there's some really subtle color changes in my different panels here. I didn't want to do like an Aztec pattern out over the whole surface. Looking at the pictures of the studio model that I'm using here for reference, taken directly from the movie, it looks like these panels were individually painted, in different shades, not just a basic Aztec paneling over the entire model. So that's what I've been kind of doing, and I'm just using really subtle, the changes are so subtle, they're almost like more differences in color temperature than they actually are, completely change in shade. I just kind of try to vary that, but I'll just kind of show you. I did some, a wash with some of my Tamiya gray that I have, and that just kind of brought out some of the little details and little ribbing areas and little things like this. That's what you normally do on a model that has this kind of detail on it. And then I masked off these different bars here on this assembly and just kind of sprayed those different shades of gray and stuff, trying to keep it, like I said, very, very subtle. And with the idea being that if this had a really bright light, when they filmed this model in 2001, they had an entirely black velvet background, and then they took one really, really bright light source and kind of off at a high angle, shined it down on the model kind of like at an angle like this, and so you saw everything on the top kind of edges and everything were really bright and washed out and gave the appearance that it was almost a really bright white color, and then the rest of the detail kind of falls off into the shadows. And so if you did that with the same color that we have here, it would give that effect. When you look at it in a little bit lower light like this, it appears more grayish, and you can start seeing some of the differences in the the actual shading and coloring that they had on the hull of the ship. So, but again, I'm just trying to be really, really subtle with it, and I'm just continuing that theme. I'm using that same color on my little cargo modules here, and I'm just I took a little bit of a darker shade and just kind of with a real small brush went around and painted all these really small different panels by hand, and you can see they look really nice. They're just they don't pop out like crazy, but you can notice that they're there. Just kind of, like I said, really subtle like that, and that'll be the continuing theme for the rest of the paint job on the model. So what we're going to do now is we've got several of these cargo modules to put together. So there's a couple little tricks on these things that you got to pay attention to so you don't get them mixed up. So we're going to build a couple of those for you, and then we'll have that. We're going to wrap up this video with completing the entire installing all the little cargo modules that go on this rear part of the spine area. Then once we're at the kind of the middle here, which I keep forgetting is way out of picture because this thing is so long, but this is the antenna array assembly here, which is kind of right in the middle. We've got another whole section we've got to do forward, but it's going to be kind of repetitive of this same thing. So if we show you this area right here, you'll have a good understanding of how the rest of the front end goes together, and we won't have to repeat that. All right, so let me get a few of these module pieces off of the sprues. We'll come back, have them laid out on the bench here for you, and we'll start putting a few of those together. Be right back. Okay, well, we're moving right along with the assembly of our Discovery model, and now we're working on a whole bunch of these cargo modules that get installed along the entire spine area of the ship. We showed you that we started putting a few of those on the rear section there. I want to work on completing the rear section before I move forward. So I've got to assemble some more of these different shapes of modules, and I wanted to take you through that process. Moebius did a great job as far as the way they engineered these. You basically go through the instruction sheet and identify the parts, find them on the sprues, and you have these sort of little groups of these that all go together. And what they've done here to help you with the assembly is they've put little key identifiers on here so that when you try to glue these together, they have to line up a certain way, otherwise they won't fit together properly. And that shows you that you're assembling each module with the proper parts that go with it. So I've got all these parts cut out. We've got the bottom piece here. We've got the two side pieces that kind of go together and shape the roof. And then we've got the two kind of end cap pieces on here, which they kind of use part number 25 and 26 over and over again for the first several groups of these modules. And then right towards the end here, you start using part 25 and 27, which 27 has just a little bit different detail on it on the outside. So, but like I mentioned here, you can see if I hold this part up to you on the floor area here, we got we got 2 keys on this side and we got 1 on the center on this side, so that the wall, you can see, is keyed the same way. When you grab the right part, you're going to see it has 2 little notches in it that'll line up with the 2 notches on one side, and on the other side you'll just have a single notch there, so that helps you to keep that straight. Same thing on the end caps. You got the notch kind of over towards the left on one side and over towards the right on the other when you turn it around. So that helps you put it together. So let's go ahead and start putting one of these together. It's real easy. I'm just using some of my Model Master liquid glue here, and we're just going to put a little fine little bead along the floor area here. Try to not get a lot on our fingers as we work with this. All right, and then we've got the little side panel here, which this one has the 1 slot in the center, so you can see where that lines up on the side here. We'll just kind of stick it down like that for now, temporarily, and let it sit. And then we'll look for our corresponding piece on the other side, which should have 2 slots in it. And I found one right off the bat here. So we'll stick that down on there. Now, before I close this up completely, I'm just going to put a little bead of glue on this little lip that you see here, this little ledge that's in between these 2 parts. And then we're just going to gently stick it together. And then just make sure the whole thing is pushed together nice and tight, and it's nice and flat looking. Now, there's still a little bit of leftover sprue material here and everything on the top. This is the flat part that glues down onto the spine that you'll not be able to really see. So that doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to let that dry a little while, and then we'll come back with our 180 grit paper here and just scuff that down a little bit and make sure that's nice and smooth and flat. But now we've got to put our end caps on there. So we've got this part number 25 and 26, and you'll be able to see right away that each part has a little key on the back of there, just like I talked about, and the one that we want to put on this end is kind of over to the right, so we'll grab that part. I'm just putting a little bit more glue in this little slot here at the end, and just put that on there like that. And the same thing on the other end here. Key is more over towards the left, so you can't get those mixed up. Put that on there. And these fit together nice and tight. We don't have to worry about a lot of seams or anything on there. Again, this little imperfect area here, you can't see it anyway. It's glued onto the spine basically upside down like that. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and finish building all these. I've got to build 18 of these. This is actually the D, letter D version of the cargo module, and then I've got to build 18 more of the E version, and I'll have all the cargo modules complete. I've been working on some of these other ones and getting those ready. After I finish assembling them, I basically prime them, spray them with some black, and then go over them with my hull color, kind of in a mist coat to give it a little bit of that pre-shading for the, help bring out some of the detail. And then I just went in and hand brushed on all these little detail panels here in a little bit darker shade of gray, and kind of like what I talked about on the hull there, just real subtle. So I've been going over and doing those one at a time. So what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and finish all these out, and then we're going to come back and finish picking out the ones that go on the spine. I'll show you the diagram they have here to help you with that. You can see they've got the whole spine laid out here, and we've got A, B, C, D, and E. They show exactly where they go on the section of the ship, and you have your size chart here and what they look like. So we just kind of line all these up and say, okay, that's A or B or C or D, E, and we'll put it on the model in its proper place. We want to build up this whole back section right here and stop. I'm not going to put the antenna on until almost the very end, because we're going to be working with the model, tipping it upside down while we're working on it and everything, and we don't want to damage that. Up here towards the front, we're going to build the same sub-assembly with all these cargo pods mounted on the spine, and then we're going to work on our forward command sphere right there at the very end. Now, as I mentioned in the last update, or the last video, my good friend Jerry's working on the decals for the photo etch that we're going to be installing here at the front in the command sphere, so that might be a week or two off yet. We've got the big model show coming up here in San Antonio that we're all going to attend, so that might slow that down a little bit, but next couple of weeks for sure, I'm sure we'll see the decals, and we can keep moving on with our build. But we've got a lot more to do in between now and then anyway. So, all right, I'm going to work on these cargo modules, come back and show you those all built and painted, we'll start putting them on the rest of the area at the rear here and call this video for today a wrap. Be right back, everybody. Well, here we are again, moving along. I just got back from finishing painting all of our little cargo modules here. Got these all put together, so we're all finished with that part. I've been putting the remaining modules on the spine here, and we've got it all down to we just have these 3 left going on this side. We'll have the rear section of the model all finished up. So let's go ahead and get these put on, and you can see here that these only go on a certain way. They only fit a certain way. The pegs are a little bit offset here, the mounting slots. So you'll see, and they have, you know, the detail of raised detail on one side and flat on the other, so you can kind of tell the spacing should be equal between all of them as they're mounted on the spine. So we'll get this one put on here next to this last one on the back. These all sit on here really good, and I did take my hobby knife and scrape off a little bit of paint there on the spine, so we made sure we had a good bond on this stuff. Okay, so here's how the spine looks after we finished all the assembly here on the rear section of the model. And you can see our little paint detail on the cargo modules there. Just kind of went around and hand painted some of the highlights on the raised details there, and then dusted over that with a little bit more of the hull color just to blend it all in. Don't want all that to be too obvious like we talked about, just kind of real subtle and everything. So all of our paint work is all blended in and everything done at the rear. Just kind of recapping here, we worked on our rear section here so we can take this lid off, and we've got our battery compartment all set up in there for our 9-volt battery and our control board that we'll be installing here in the next maybe next video or two by the time that comes in. We used a total of 6 0805 SMDs to light up the rear engines here. We've got all of our paint detail and everything done now here at the back. So these are all set up and ready to go. Once we connect those to the light board, we'll have a remote control feature that'll light those up at the push of a button. Then we're going to run our wires from the rear part of our tube that we modified here all the way up to the front, extend it through to the forward section, and we'll have our power for all of our lighting in the command sphere that we're going to work on coming up shortly here. So I hope you enjoyed following along with us, and I hope you're building one of these models right along with the video as we go forward with this, everybody. Hope you're enjoying it. So again, thanks to tuning into our channel. Thanks for all of our subscribers. We'll see you on the next video, which will be update number 3, and we'll continue building the forward section of the model. So until we see you next time, take care, and happy modeling, everyone.